Welcome everybody to season 3 of Are You Ready for a Podcast, the official podcast of Are You Ready for Some Football, Fantasy Football League. We did not have a preseason podcast last week. We couldn't manage schedules, but we are here after week 1. So a lot of reactions to get to. Parker, how's it going?
It's going okay. Wasn't my favorite week of all time. Wasn't the best way to start a season. But we're making it.
I would say your description of your week is maybe the biggest like underreaction you've had this week. I would say that's the mildest way to put how you've been feeling about fantasy the last like few days.
Yeah, I think I, I'm fighting the urge to just give up. So I'm a little bit just separated. I'm sort of past the stage of grief, and I'm now on to acceptance.
Yeah, fair enough. So we'll get to your team, I guess, eventually, but we will start. We're gonna do a very quick recap of the weeks. We're gonna try to keep the recaps pretty quick and get into power rankings, and then we're not gonna have a guest this week, but in the future, in our guest interviews, because the recaps tend to be the most boring part of each podcast. After I listen back to a few this off season,
Yeah,
so
our goal for this one is 30 minutes. We say this all the time that we're going to make them shorter, and it never happens. But I believe this year that it will happen.
the well, it'll be shorter than the first episodes of the last couple seasons where we ran through like every single team and like every draft pick they made, and then last year we had like a really long interview with Ben. So I can at least promise that it'll be shorter than week 1 last year and week 1 2 years ago. So we'll start just going down eat through each performance. So I beat Dan 112 to 98. Um, Hunter took down Austin 93 to 59. Austin was low scorer of the week. You and Grant had a very low scoring affair. Well, really low scores generally around the league this week, only 300-point performances. But you and Grant, unsurprisingly, was the lowest winner, just continuing his ridiculous streak of lucky wins from last year. He beat you 81 to 74. Thomas took down Nick 104 to 93. Nick also lost J.K. Dobbins. We'll get into that a little bit. And Morgan with the high score of the week. Oh, I'm sorry, there was 400-point performances, only 300-point winners. Morgan with the high performance of the week beat Zach 119 to 103. Just an outstanding performance from the Dallas defense. We'll get into that. And then finally, Colin defeated Ben 90 to 78. So in general, week 1, really low scoring week. Uh, there was, I think there was like going into Monday night, and then there was a low scoring Monday night game. I think it was like 59 touchdowns or something. And obviously, not all of those by fantasy players a lot, or by own fantasy players a lot, by just random guys that got picked up on the waiver wire this week, which we'll also get into. So, did you have any other big reactions from in general the league this week?
I think that's a good point. It was low scoring for sure. I think the average is going to be around 90 points. I haven't put it in the spreadsheet yet, but that's would by far be the lowest scoring week 1 in a while. Usually, week 1 scoring can be a little bit lower than other weeks, just because people are figuring out roles and who's good and who's bad, and there's not as many injuries to kind of consolidate fantasy points. But 90 points is going to be very very low. I think that I was going to try to limit us to one takeaway each from this week, and I think that my takeaway is that we don't know who's good yet. I think that some good teams had some bad performances, and some bad teams had some good performances, and I think there's a lot jumbled up in the middle. Morgan led the league in scoring, but he got 35 points from his defense. Austin was the lowest score, but he's got a couple of guys that won't be back for 3 or 4 weeks. So I think that there's just a lot of shades of gray, and I don't know. I really don't feel like I learned much from anyone this week in terms of to change my rankings, but also who's for real and who's not.
Yeah, I think Tyreek Hill and the Dallas defense like just so far and away separated themselves from every other anybody else that was in a lineup this week, that I think that put me and Morgan at a huge advantage. I guess you look at it. I think early we've in general, since we started the auction, have been in favor of the stars and scrubs strategy for the most part. I think that puts you at an advantage if you have two high end guys and you can just hit on a couple dart throws. And I mean, as through 1 week, that's worked out for Thomas and for Morgan, who went heavy on it in our draft. Those two had the top four guys in the draft. They each spent like about $140 on their top two picks. So Eckler's hurt, or Eckler is a little questionable, and Jamar didn't have a great game, but Thomas still put up the third most points in the league. Obviously, Morgan got two really good performances from his top two guys, along with that Dallas defense performance. So I think those two teams are looking pretty good. And then you kind of look at teams like Ben. I mean, you had a lot of injuries, but teams like Ben, teams like Dan, Colin, who I guess beat Ben, but was only scored about 90 points, and the depth was a little lower, but scored a little bit fewer. But I think that's to be expected when you have. I think your studs are going to show up, and I think those other teams are kind of figuring out their lineups, like you said.
Yeah, definitely hard to. I wanted to make it where our one takeaway was like a individual team or player takeaway or whatnot, but this week it's just going to be hard to do that.
Yeah, I was looking through it, and there really isn't.
Yeah. So I guess we can move on to kind of talking about what other things that happened this week. A few notable players were injured. That'll affect a couple of teams, and then we'll talk about the waivers and sort of go from there. So injuries, obviously the big notable one NFL wise is the Aaron Rodgers injury. I think he was on Nick's roster, but maybe Nick did not start him. Either way, not as concerning from that standpoint. No, he was not on Nick's roster. I don't know who had him rostered.
Yeah, I don't know if he got drafted.
Yeah, but that's not the main, I guess, takeaway. It's how it affects the other weapons.
Yeah.
The Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. So I guess Colin has Garrett Wilson. That'll be kind of the big loser. Move him down in the rankings, obviously, without Aaron Rodgers, and move it to Zach Wilson. And then I guess the other big injury would be J.K. Dobbins. I think Nick had J.K. Dobbins as one of his running backs.
Yeah.
So that's a big loss.
Yeah, and I believe Austin lost Deontay Johnson for a few weeks. It looks like Darren Waller might be out a few weeks. I mean, we didn't get into this because we didn't have another podcast. You've lost Cooper Kupp for a few weeks, so there are a bunch of injuries, and that's kind of as we get into the power rankings, that's kind of affected my power rankings some. But yeah, that's two big blows for Nick, who had good running back depth, and now one of his running backs is out for the year, so that's done. And then his other one, his quarterback, who was going to elevate his. I guess we'll see what they do at quarterback. But Aaron Rodgers was supposed to elevate Breece's value a lot. Now that's gone. So I think Breece will still have a fine fantasy year, but not quite the upside that he was going to have. And Garrett Wilson, I think, is just the big loser out of any healthy player, because I think he goes from a surefire wide receiver 1 to, I mean, maybe he's a wide receiver 2. Wouldn't shock me if he's not a wide receiver 2, even a wide receiver 2 this year. So that's a tough break for Colin, but it is still a long season, and Colin did get a week 1 win. So
yeah. And then moving on to talk about waivers. I guess it was an aggressive week in terms of waiver on the waiver wire. As you may often see after week 1, and there was a lot of guys people were going after. But the most aggressive team was Zach putting over $160 into Kyren Williams and Joshua Kelly, and he was really trying to bolster that running back room, which was his big weakness coming out the draft.
Yeah, I didn't hate the strategy. I probably would have been a little more patient. I think you and I discussed Josh Kelly kind of offline, and I know Eckler is dealing with an ankle issue. I don't think he practiced today, but it just seems like a lot of money to spend on a guy who you don't feel great about starting. I know he had a good game with Eckler, but I don't think you're ever going to feel great about starting him as long as Eckler plays. And so just kind of being injury dependent, spending that much money on a guy, I don't know. I really like Kyren Williams. I put in the second highest bid on him as a Cam Akers owner. very concerned about how Kyron Williams how much he was used and got to the goal line carries and just looked a lot better than Cam Akers. So I didn't mind the bid on that. But Zach, I know he's bad running backs, but this is basically like these are basically his running backs, and he's got to hope for injuries or guys to his guys to be really good and elevate their roles. And I don't know, maybe it'll work out with his ridiculous receivers, but I'm not sure I would have spent all my money in week one, essentially, which is what he did.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it was a little aggressive. I think Kyron Williams may have more staying power in terms of a role in the offense. And then Joshua Kelly, if he gets a couple weeks out of him, then it was probably worth it if he plays as well as he did in week one. But we've seen in the past him sort of flop in these moments. So in terms of Joshua Kelly, so we'll see. And then I guess the other big move was Dan adding Puka Nacua for what was it, $72. That was sort of one of the most bid on players. I think he had like 6 or 7 teams bidding on him as he kind of dominated the targets in the Cooper Cup light role this week. So I think for Dan, that move makes a ton of sense. His receiver room was a huge, huge question mark. Maybe still is. I don't know that Puka Nacua comes in and makes his receivers, great, but he definitely solidifies and should have at least a few weeks of good production.
Yeah, Dan's receivers were, and I played on this week, are absolutely awful. I don't know why he was starting Odell. I I Michael Thomas, he spent like $10 on Michael Thomas at the draft, which I didn't think made much sense. I guess he had a fine game on Sunday, but seemed like a lot at the draft. And so yeah, I guess I don't hate what he did, but like again, that's kind of Puka's kind of like a limited upside until Cup gets back. So it seemed aggressive. I put in a very low bid on him, and I knew I wasn't going to get him, but I guess it could work out. He looked good. He was getting open and got targeted like the second most out of any player this week behind Tyreek Hill, I think. So we'll see. But yeah. So if we want to move on to power rankings, because I think those are all the major waiver ads. I guess
Yeah,
Justice Hill. Who got
I guess
Justice Hill?
Nick getting Justice Hill to kind of keep control of that Ravens backfield. He also kind of spin up for Jordan Love, Hunter Henry, Durham Smythe. So not the big top end money, but still Nick dropped a fair bit of coin on the waiver wire this week to kind of solidify some of those roles. He kind of sort of cut half of his team and refreshed and spent almost $75 this week filling those spots.
Yeah, the Jordan Love one was interesting. I don't know who he was betting against.
He's been against himself, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
Zach down to $21 on the waivers. Nick and Dan at 128. Most of the rest of everybody has around their full budget. So it was interesting to see him spending that much. But yeah, we can move on to power rankings.
Okay. So I think we'll run through our power rankings. I guess we'll go bottom to top, and then we'll kind of discuss some of our differences. So for me, I have Dan in last. I had him last preseason, so I didn't really not much about this week changed. Although he'll get Kelsey back, I guess. I have Ben at 11. I have Zach at 10. I have you at 9. I have Nick at 8. I have Colin at 7. I have Grant at 6. I have Thomas at 5. I have myself at 4. I have Austin at 3. Morgan at 2, and Hunter in the number 1 spot.
All right. And where'd you have Zach?
Zach at 10th.
And then you had, what did you say, Austin where was Austin? 3?
3, yeah.
We definitely have some differences we can talk about then. I'll go through my rankings. I was just writing down what you said so I could have that handy. But I have Ben at 12, me at 11, Austin at 10, Dan at 9, Grant at 8, Nick at 7, Colin at 6, you at 5, Zach at 4, Thomas at 3, Morgan at 2, Hunter at 1. So obviously, I guess the things that stand out there, we both agree Hunter 1, Morgan 2. Both really like those teams. I really like Hunter after the draft. I think he always kind of was my number 1. And so we both have the rematch of last year's championship at the top of our power rankings.
Yeah, who'd you have at 3, 6, and 7?
3, I had Thomas. 6, Colin. 7, Nick.
So who was 4?
4 was Zach
Wait, Nick was 7, and then who's 8?
Grant. This is for
Okay,
preparation.
well,
Should
who's
have been
9?
done pre-show.
Who's not? Yeah, who's 9? Yeah, we should have shared this before.
Dan.
I think I got well. Okay, Dan. Okay, that's all right. So I have yours. Yeah. So I guess there are two big differences. You have Austin at 10. I have him at 3. I think I'm guessing, and I think this is probably fair of you to do. I'm guessing you have him like based on what his team is now and not what it will be potentially in the future.
Well, I don't think Jonathan Taylor plays this year. I think if he does, it's not for the Colts.
Okay, I think we
I worry
disagree on
about his
that.
health.
Yeah.
So I'm not giving him much credit for getting Jonathan Taylor back. And then and so that I think that's probably where our big difference is. If you count Jonathan Taylor as, a top 6 running back after week 5, then I think you'd have a much different opinion.
I don't think he's top 6, but I think he's a startable running back. Like, I think he's a top 20. Well, like, I think he's probably a RB2 if he plays, which I think he'll be back. Yeah, sometime around week 5, 6, 7, somewhere in there. And
Okay.
then he'll get Kamara back. I wasn't super impressed with how Jamal looked, so hopefully the Saints don't use Kamara like that, and he'll be more valuable than Jamal looked on Sunday. But that'll be another piece. And I just think Austin, I have no idea what the hell he thought when he put in Kadarius Toney over Brandon Ayuk. And if he hadn't done that, he would have scored, instead of scoring sub 60, he would have been at 88, which isn't great, but is for this week, like we were talking about earlier, would have been a slightly below average performance. So, um, I have no idea what he was doing, taking Brandon Ayuk out of his lineup. Hopefully, he doesn't do that anymore, and except maybe against me too, so I can justify this ranking. But I still really like Austin's team. I think it's really deep. At at running back and at receiver, he got a bad Saquon game, a bad Jalen Hurts game, and a goose from Dallas Goedert. He did lose Deontay. I guess that hurts. Um, but Deontay should be back, and I still like his depth. So he's lost basically his third guy. He'll be without 3 what you could consider starters at the end of the year, this upcoming week and for the next couple weeks. And I think and his team is I still really like his starting lineup. So I would say fully healthy, his team is going to be very good. But he's got to get to the playoffs. He's got to get a good enough record to put himself in playoff
Yeah, I think
position.
that's my thing is that he's already 0-1. He won't have Kamara for 2 more weeks. He won't have Jonathan Taylor for another 3 weeks at the earliest. Deontay Johnson probably the same. 2, 3 weeks at the earliest. And his depth, maybe is good if you count those guys as on his team and playable, but right now they're not. And so if he starts out 0-3, 0-4, then he's in a real hole. I think Jalen Hurts obviously elevates his floor. Had a bad game this week, but in general is one of the most reliable guys in fantasy. But I'm not a huge believer in Dallas Goedert. I know Austin is, but he doesn't seem to be a red zone option. So I'm worried about that. I don't think Ayuk's going to catch 2 touchdowns every week. He's in a very crowded receiving room. And so, when it's not an Ayuk week and he's still missing all those guys, his flex options are very, very limited. He's relying on Khalil Herbert, who I'm very worried will just lose his job entirely. I don't know. I have a lot of questions. I'm very worried that he starts 0-3, 0-4, and that's just nearly an impossible hole to dig out of.
Yeah, I think we're kind of doing the reverse of what we did with Hunter a couple years ago when you like kept like judging him on what his team like could be, and I kept like ranking him on what I thought his team was.
Yeah, how'd
So
that turn
I
out,
kind of
Joe?
think we're doing the Hunter missed the playoffs 2 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I guess you learned your lesson, and I didn't learn that lesson. But the other big difference is Zach. You have him at 10, or I have him at 10, sorry, and you have him at 4. Um, I just think I don't know. The running backs. I I like I said, I like Kyron. I don't love the Josh Kelly pickup, and this is pretty much his team now. I mean, pre-trade, like he's not gonna make another big waiver wire splash because he just won't have the money unless he trades for it. Um, so without trading, I don't know. I don't fully see it. He did have a good performance this week, but it. I don't know how much you can rely on Antonio Gibson. It kind of seems like Brian Robinson's the guy. He's got Jamal for another couple weeks. we're doing kind of the reverse of Austin. He's going to lose Jamal. Um, so there's not one running back that he has that I feel any sort of good about. His receivers are great, but that can kind of only take you so far. He got an awesome game from Tua. Uh, I don't think Tua is going to be that great going forward. And then, so I guess the running back you kind of feel best about after this week is Algier because the Falcons just run the ball so damn much.
Yeah, I mean, I think Algier
But
is this year's equivalent of last year's Jamal Williams, who ironically he
Jamal
also
Williams,
Jamal Williams. But people kind of overlooked him because teams RB2, but they're going to run the shit out of the ball. He's going to get it a ton. I don't worry about Algier. I think he's a reliable,
but
back end RB1, high end RB2.
yeah, I like Bijan more than I like Swift, and
I like them both.
I think
I think they're going to run the ball 35 times.
but I think the role, I think Bijan's role is going to be more than as the year goes on, more than what Swift was last year. So I see what you're saying, but his running backs are just god awful, and his receivers are awesome. There's no doubt about that, but I think there's a few too many holes on his team for me. But
I mean, I think there's one hole in his team. It's just too big of a hole for you.
yeah, Evan Ingram I think is fine. And Tua is an injury risk, so I'm not like as a Tyreek Hill owner, I'm a little scared of hinging a lot of that on Tua. But so I think outside of his, I think there's one. To me, I think there's one big strength, and then I just look at a lot of
I like what he's done everywhere else.
okay to bad.
His four receivers are gonna just absolutely win him some weeks, and then Tua, if
Yeah,
he
that's
can
true.
elevate and be a top 6 quarterback, I think, which is kind of I kind of think may happen after watching this week. I just think the Tua being the upside play really kind of elevates his team, solidifies everything. He's got to figure out running back, but everyone's going to be figuring out running back at some point this year. So that's I don't know. I think he's got enough options on his bench. Somebody will work out, and then he'll be solid everywhere.
Fair enough. I guess other differences. Uh, I mean, we have Grant a couple spots apart, Nick,
We sort of have the
Thomas,
same bunch of teams in the middle.
Dan. Yeah, everything else is pretty similar. I guess you have Dan at 9, I have him at 12. Honestly, I I didn't really think too hard about the power rankings. I would maybe have him ahead of Dan, I guess. Now that he's getting Kelsey back,
Yeah,
he
I
had a
think
pretty
the bottom
he had
four
a
for
pretty
me.
decent week. I think Puka's gonna be a big like see how good he is moving forward. If Puka's like a real piece for him, I think that improves his team greatly. It gives him boosts to his receivers. He's got very good running back depth, and he's got Kelsey. So, um,
I guess yeah, and I had him higher than you, but I'm probably not that much higher on him. I mean, I like his running backs, but I don't think they're like really that special outside of Tony Pollard. Like I think he's got some sort of his running back. He's got a bunch of middling guys, but he's got nobody else that I really see like making a big jump. And then his receivers just aren't good enough to carry him that far. So I have him at 9, but I don't think I'm really that far apart from you on him.
yeah, and honestly, I'm really just giving Dan a clip to play later whenever he hosts in the middle of the season, whenever, so he can like distort my voice or whatever he does. So, you're welcome for that, Dan.
Some board material.
So yeah, bulletin board material. So we'll move on to the picks this week. Normally we'll have a guest starting next week, I think, and not I'm guessing not every week. You're probably not going to be here with your schedule, and so I'll probably have to solo host a few this year. So we'll have a guest on in future weeks, but this week it's just us. So we'll go through the picks real quick. We'll just start at the top, I guess, or we'll start with most projected. Most projected this week is unsurprisingly our number 1 team, Hunter. He is a like 11-point favorite against like we were just talking about Dan. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we both are very far apart with these teams in our rankings. So I'm picking Hunter. I'm sure we both will. Are we picking against the spread or are we just picking straight up?
I think we just picked straight up last year because like
Yeah.
against the spread was like so weird.
Yeah, we were terrible. So yeah, picking straight up. I
Yeah.
gotta go with Hunter here. I mean, maybe without Aaron Jones, we'll see on that. But his upside is just so much higher than Dan. And Josh Allen had a bad week, but Hunter still scored like 112 points. Gabe Davis is gonna come through at some point. I don't know. I just really like Hunter's upside, and I really don't like Dan's. So I'm going Hunter.
Yeah, I agree. And Hunter was projected the most points in the league for a while until uh I got that insane Tyreek game, and then Morgan got the insane Dallas defense game, and then Hunter didn't quite have the Monday night from his guys that he was expecting. So Hunter's team, I think, just such a high floor. If provided Aaron Jones plays, then yeah, I'll agree. I'll take Hunter to win. Our next matchup is going to be um I think our next matchup is Ben. I actually projected the second most points in the league with 110.5. He is playing Thomas at 103.4. I think we both have Thomas ranked higher, and I think I'm going to go with Thomas. I think Jamar, you get a little bit of a bounce back game. Mixon, I think he has his two Bengals. I think will play better than they did last week. Eckler, I guess it all depends on Eckler's status, but Eckler I think will go. So Eckler is about as reliable as the guys you get. Brian Robinson looked good last week. I think Thomas's team is very very solid. I don't like that he has. I'm now just noticing this. I don't like that he has two Bengals and two Commanders, but that's kind of a minor thing, I guess.
Yeah, that was odd drafting, especially um, for the Bengals, two of his top three players being Bengals starters, and then
But
speaking
yeah, I noticed the Bengals thing in the draft,
speaking
but
of having two commanders, we got Ben with both Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin. I'm assuming he'll try to move off of one of those at some point this year. But yeah, I mean the thing on Ben is really his depth. I mean he's got Mahomes, but other than that, he doesn't really have a positional advantage anywhere. So I'm going Thomas. Early in the year, he went the stars and studs approach, and he hasn't had any injuries to really stress his depth yet. So I think early in the year is perfect time for Thomas to have this matchup. And I'm going Thomas as well.
I agree. I think you said stars and studs again.
Stars and scrubs. Um, yes, I have a propensity to say stars and studs, which does not make any sense.
I mean that's a valid strategy. I think if you can just draft all the good players, you should probably do that.
Yeah, that would be a good strategy. But no, I do think
Yeah.
these stars and scrubs teams early in the year are kind of at a big advantage. The problem becomes if
Yeah.
they lose some of those guys, they don't have the depth, and when they have bye weeks and things, it stresses your depth, and so you kind of may cede some of that advantage to the teams with more depth, like Ben. But right now, I think Thomas has the advantage, even though projected 7-point underdog by ESPN.
And you wouldn't know anything about that. So the
No, wouldn't know
things
anything.
going wrong to your stars.
Yeah, no, of course not.
So our next matchup, speaking of stars and scrubs, it will be Morgan and Austin. Former roommates, whenever we had rivals, weren't they rivals? So they're facing off. I think this will be a good game, but Austin losing Deontay is tough. Still not getting his full lineup back is not great. So I'm going to take Morgan. I would imagine, based off of our power rankings argument, you will agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking Morgan. I think that it's going to be so hard to pick against a team with McCaffrey, Justin Jefferson, Justin Fields, all healthy. Um, and Austin is unfortunately in the opposite situation where all his guys are hurt. And he may end up starting Kadarius Toney again. He just doesn't have the options to turn to. Not that Morgan's depth is great, but Morgan's Morgan's ceiling is just so much higher with some of these guys. So yeah, I'm taking Morgan.
And so next, look what we have. We've got you as a uh, projected favorite over Colin, just slight favorite, 2 points, 108 to about 106. Your team coming off of a tough week and a very low scoring loss to Grant. Colin coming off of a solid win against Ben. I guess we'll start with your thoughts on this.
I mean, I'm picking Colin here. I guess that was probably obvious from the get go. But I think obviously easiest for me to look at my team. And losing Raheem Mostert is just not something I can sustain. I projected a favorite, but that's assuming Mostert and Christian Watson play, which I don't really expect either of them to play. So in that situation, I'm probably starting Salvon Ahmed and Jaden Reed or something along those lines. And it's at that point, sort of we're pulling the cord. So I think got to go Colin here. Joe Burrow have a bounce back week. He's probably going to really feed Jamar Chase this week. See if we can get him off the snide to start the season. And I think Darren Waller is questionable, but with or without Darren Waller, Colin's a big favorite. Having DeAndre Swift without Kenny Gainwell is a nice bonus for him this week. So yeah, I think Colin rolls here.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the under here because it's 214, and like you said, there's three key guys in this matchup that are very questionable, might not play: Raheem, Christian Watson, and Darren Waller. So I think this is I think this is as high as the total is going to get. You got to take the under while you can. And these are two teams that combined for like, I don't know, 170 points last week or whatever, 165. So if you're going to give me 214, I'm going to take the under on that.
Great pick. I really like that pick.
Um, all right, so our second to last matchup is going to be Grant coming off the win against you, and Nick looking to bounce back after his rough week and his loss and his injuries. So Grant's projected 5-point favorite, 107.9 to 102.9. Just looking at it, running down here, I think you're hard pressed to pick against Grant, although I'm gonna pick Nick. I think looking at his starting lineup, I still really like his starting lineup. His depth is really hurt by the JK injury, but he had good running back depth, so he can sustain that a little bit. Brees looked really good on Monday night. ETN looked good on Sunday. Chubb looked good on Sunday, so I'm feeling good about his running back. And then he's got pretty good receivers, so I'm not losing total faith in Nick's team yet. And Grant, he's getting Andrews back, but God, I refuse to allow him to keep getting away with these low scoring wins. So I'm going to take Nick to pull the upset.
Yeah, I like Nick in this spot as well. He's I don't want to make the same pick as you. So I'm struggling with that a little bit. I was hoping that you would kind of go for Grant here. But I was gonna say Nick's running backs. He lost J.K. Dobbins, but Nick Chubb is actually gonna smash against Pittsburgh. I really love that matchup for him. And then ETN against Kansas City. He that game could kind of devolve into a shootout. And he had a great role this week. I'm really high on ETN right now. So I don't mind Nick's running backs. Grant, yeah, like you said, the luck's gonna run out at some point. I'm not sure about if Mark Andrews is gonna play. I kind of assume that he will, but I'm not certain of that. I do like him picking up Zay Jones to kind of stack with Trevor Lawrence and sort of fill out his wide receiver depth. I was a little bit worried about that previously. He's also picked up Zach Moss, which is a nice pickup for him. So I think that he had another sneaky week on waivers. That's kind of what Grant does. He sort of just kind of flies under the radar and picks some guys up that really fit his team nicely. So I don't want to pick the same as you. I do like Nick here, but I'm gonna go Grant. I think Grant will win. He sort of always pulls this off, and we're gonna be looking at it in a few weeks, and he's gonna be 5-2 and in first place, and he's gonna have snuck up on us again.
Yeah, 5-2, and he'll be like 8th or 9th in scoring or something like that. So our last matchup is myself and Zach. I'm a slight favorite, 107 to 105. I think I might just pick myself to win every week this year. The luck just seems to be going my way this year. I didn't have to play Kelsey in week 1, and that my team went off, but that could have been the deciding factor in the game, even though Luke Musgrave played pretty well and replacement for Dan. So things just seem to be on my side this year. Seems like Devontae. Not sure about his status, but I would imagine he plays. And I just think my team is better than Zach. Don't love how Jamal looked last week. Algier, what are the odds he gets in the end zone twice again? So, and every Tua, and Jalen Waddle a little hobbled right now. So basically, it's just going to be the Tua and Tyreek show. So all the Tua points are basically going to go to Tyreek. So that'll be advantage to me. So, I like myself here. I'm going to pick myself to beat Zach.
I'll take the over. I think it's gonna be a shootout. I like Zach's team as we've discussed, but I don't really pick against you. So I'll take the over here. I think that this should be a high scoring game. I like Zach's receivers. Like you said, the Tua and Tyreek points are gonna be going bananas here. So I'll take the over on 212.2 and see what we can do with that.
Yeah, I would say that would have hit last week because both me and Zach went over 100 points. So I think that's a good pick also. So that's the picks for this week, and that'll do it for week 1. We'll try to be more consistent about getting them out week to week. I know last year we missed on a few weeks, like here and there with, we just got kind of busy. So we'll try to do a better job this year of getting one up every week. I know that's kind of a weird thing to say after we missed last week, but yeah, so thanks for tuning in, everybody. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and enjoy the football.